Some news from Capitol Hill. So 6 senators have actually written a letter to Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, saying, can you please clarify the definition of broker in the infrastructure law? And also, we're giving you a deadline. So according to them, the law contains overly broad language of what a broker could be. So it could include miners and developers and all kinds of people that would not have access to the information that would be required of them for their reporting requirements. So Senators Rob Portman, Mike Crapo, Pat Toomey, Mark Warner, Kirsten Sinema, and Cynthia Lummis wrote this letter, and they said, now that this bill has become law, Congress has a responsibility to ensure that it is implemented effectively and in accordance with congressional intent. So pretty interesting stuff there. They did try to pass this back in August, and then it was derailed. And so now they're trying again and saying, Yellen, you have the power to do this. You need to do this. So I'm going to throw this to the group for your take. Zach, what are your thoughts on this letter? And do you think that Yellen is going to comply?
I love a good deadline. Deadline was the best thing about this one. I don't know. I mean, I think we've been wanting this clarity, and I think we, like we've talked about this before, right? Where Treasury is saying, hey, we're not going to enforce it, no big deal, whatever. And some people are saying, well, I don't know, that seems a little squishy. We don't like that. So the fact that folks are still on this issue asking for that clarity codified into law, I think is fantastic. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be an open question as to whether or not this gets acted on. And I don't know. I don't think I'm able to cast a bet either way on this one. But you would think that making this as clear as possible when it comes to the letter of the law would be useful. Should there be some interest in supporting this industry in a compliant way in the U.S. going forward? So hopefully it'll work out. We'll see. Maybe the deadline will do something. Maybe it won't. But time will tell.
I think if this happens before the end of the year, it will be a holiday miracle. I mean, I think these senators have been pushing for this clarity since the summer, and we haven't really seen anything. But to Zach's point, as long as they keep pushing, I think that there's pressure. That the pressure is necessary for something to change here. So I just hope that they keep letting their voice be heard, and I hope that something happens. But I don't think it's going to happen before the end of the year.
Yeah, I'll jump in. It's interesting when we're talking about the representative from the Treasury, this anonymous source who said, oh, no one's going to misinterpret this. We're not going to overly broadly interpret this law. And that's really all the guidance we've received and all the assurance that this isn't going to be to the detriment of the crypto industry. So many issues with that. First of all, you have to presume that this source from Treasury considers overly broad the same way that we consider overly broad. I mean, they could be like, no, including minus, and this is not overly broad at all. And second of all, this is just one Treasury Secretary, one administration. You get in the next one, they could define it completely differently. And because we have that codified in law, there's not much you can do about it. So getting tight language around this right now is really important for the crypto industry, which is why you have these senators pushing back. But Will, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of took me off guard a little bit was Portman was the original senator who included some language that made a lot of people unhappy. Might be mistaken on that, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of how it broke down in July and August, where we saw the language that was first put in the infrastructure bill was just completely wrong, like from a technical layer. And there's pushback. There's some amendments going back and forth. We saw that the amendment ended up not going through to the infrastructure bill, and they just had to ship it as was at the time. And now that language is codified into law. And I think just for viewers, like what they're trying to do is change that language so then the regulators who are looking at this bill can say, hey, this is how it should be interpreted, not this way. And that does need to be done because future administrations might not look at this infrastructure bill and view it the same way that the text is supposed to be interpreted right now at the present moment. And that could lead to like a lot of overreaching regulations in the future, which nobody wants to have. And it is kind of like the usual suspects versus the usual suspects here, right? We have Janet Yellen, who's made a lot of critiques against digital assets in the past. And they're asking her for a little help, but I don't think they're going to get a lot of help from her unless they have some sort of legal leverage just from how the regulation system works up against the Senate. Naomi, I'll throw it back to you, though.
Yeah, just on the Portman note. So it was Portman who wrote the original language. It was sort of rushed in this midnight edition right before voting was meant to happen. And everyone's like, why are they adding in like this crypto stuff? And it was obviously a pay for in the infrastructure bill. But then when you had this coalition of other people come forward and say, actually, this language would be better, Portman was initially on board. Portman said, you're right. Yeah, this is better language. Let's do it this way. And then you had Senator Warren apparently call up people, and then suddenly Portman comes out with this other language and is like, actually, second thoughts, we're going to use this other language. There was a bit of fight, and when it came down to it, they basically had to both agree and had to be a unanimous vote for either of the amendments to get through. What ended up happening was you had Alabama Senator Richard Shelby say, I will not pass this unless you also add in $5 gazillion for defense stuff. And they're like, this has nothing to do with this. No,
that
we're not going to add that.
So
he's like, we're derailing this entire thing. You had like Senator Cruz there, who was actually pretty awesome speaking up for the crypto space, who was like, please, Senator Shelby, don't do this. It's really important that we get this crypto stuff nailed down. This would be a really good amendment. If you just pass it, then I will work with you privately to, make sure that your stuff goes through as well. And he's like, nah, not going to do it. And so the whole thing was derailed. And now we're finding all these other ways to try and get that language changed. This is one of the efforts that lawmakers are trying, actually directed at Yellen herself. So we'll see if it is successful.